Hey friends, this is me Vishwas and I'm the host of this series of sessions where we are going to talk about the potential of Kubernetes and Devtron in your production. And this is a series where I call Devtronians and they come and deliver a talk in such a way that you understand the potential of Devtron in your production and also you adopt Kubernetes the right way. And thank you so much, Abhinav Dubey, for being on the show. Means a lot, my friend.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, Vishwas.
So let me just start with this question. So, hey Abhinav, how can Devtron make an impact in Kubernetes adoption today? And how is the Devtron ecosystem evolving? And what are your thoughts about it when you see Devtron adoption that is happening at scale every single day?
Yeah, so talking about Kubernetes and Kubernetes in production, so we all are aware of the fact that Kubernetes is a very, very deep ocean, right? So when you're entering into that different ocean, so you will have to learn a lot of different skills. And when you are talking about Kubernetes in production, so just using Kubernetes or adopting Kubernetes have a lot of different hurdles, right? It is very complex when you talk about uh, scaling things in Kubernetes, or when you migrate your staging environment, or different when you create different environment, when you have to manage different environments in Kubernetes, and after managing these environments, you have to migrate your entire applications in the production environment. So things become really, really complex, and that's where we come in actually. So what we are trying to do here is with Devtron, we are trying to abstract out all these complexities that Kubernetes has by its domain, and we are trying to provide a single streamlined platform from where you can manage your Kubernetes and all in and around logistics of Kubernetes and cloud-native ecosystem. So let's say, for example, you want to deploy an applications and you want to have the GitOps approach, and for GitOps, maybe you want to use Flux CD or Argo CD, whichever you are comfortable with. So again, there one extra tool comes in, right? Argo CD. So if you're using Argo CD, then you will have to learn Argo CD as well, right? Let's say you want to observe your clusters, monitor your applications health, maybe application metrics. Then you must be needing maybe Grafana and Prometheus for the observability. Maybe if you want to set up a logging stack, then you will need ELK stack or maybe EFK stack, Elastic Fluentbit and Kibana. So different tools comes into the picture, right? When we're talking about a complete ecosystem, complete Kubernetes ecosystem. And for each tool, you will have to learn that tool before you are using it, right? But here, what we are doing with Devtron is we are closely integrating these tools within the system so that you don't have to worry about the complexities of these tools, and you just have to learn the simple interface, the unified interface that Devtron provides, and everything internally is being managed by Devtron team itself and by the Devtron platform. So I think it plays a very, very important role because what we are seeing from the past couple of years, developers are using Devtron for deploying their applications into Kubernetes, which is very interesting, right? Developers are not meant to be learning Kubernetes or kubectl commands, or Kubernetes is not their forte, right? Kubernetes is something for the operations teams. But with Devtron, it enables the developers and operations teams to work together closely in a collaborative environment, and they are empowering themselves on deploying their applications. Like you say, you build and you deploy, right? So I think Devtron plays a very important role when we are talking about entire Kubernetes and cloud native ecosystem.
Yes, I think you build it, you own it. That's the
Yes,
new
exactly.
way of doing DevOps. I think the challenge is always about, can my team enter the world of Kubernetes, even though there is always a knowledge gap that we have seen, or else even the lack of experience of working with Kubernetes as well. So I think let's go on with the demo so that we understand what is it all about, and Devtron as one of the platform making an impact in the CI/CD practices. So over to you, Abhinav.
Okay, so let's get started with the demo. Perfect. Perfect. So this is how the Devtron dashboard looks like. This is a fresh new cluster installed, and Devtron has been installed in this cluster. So when you enter into the dashboard for the first time, it provides you a brief intro on brief guide to the different things that we have in Devtron. So let's say we want to create an application first. So before creating an application, you will need to configure few of the things in global configuration, basically. So under global configuration, these are the different configurations that you will need to configure. But you don't have to configure each and everything. The only prerequisite would be to configure a container registry so that it can use that container registry to pull and push your images, right? Let me provide a name, Tron. Let's change the registry type. So Devtron does support almost every registry type that you must be using, be it ECR, Docker, container registry, QA, and if there are some others like JFrog or any other container registry, if you want to use, it can be supported here. So let me provide the username, let me provide the token, just save it. Perfect. So we have saved the container registry. Now let's move back and create an application. So for creating an application, you just need to click on this create. So there are different ways, the different applications that you can create on Devtron. The first one is the custom app. So let's say if you want to deploy your application, your source code, then you would be going ahead with the custom app. Let's say if you want to deploy a Helm chart, so we'll come into that part as well in the later on. So you can choose the from Helm chart store, or if you just want to deploy a job, that can also be achieved from this single interface. App name, let's say demo hyphen go app. There are different ways. If the application is already being created, then you can just select the clone an existing application, and you will be getting all the configurations of your previous applications inherited to this new application that you are creating. But here in our case, let's go with the scratch. You can create different projects. Let's say if you have a finance app, maybe financial app or cloud app or different kinds of apps in your organization. So you can create those projects in the global configuration again. But let's go with the default one. And in fact, you can provide some different tags that would be inherited to all the resources for this application or for a single application. So once you create your application, you will be landing to the app configuration where you need to configure your source code. So let's just go with the demo source code, then we'll go app, take this application, enter, click on yes. Next is build configuration. So in the build configuration, you will need to provide your registry which you are using, the container repository. So let's say /test. There are different ways you can build your image. So let's say if you already have your Docker file in your source code, then you just need to provide the Docker file path. If you want to containerize your applications and you don't have a Docker file, then you can create the Docker file runtime from these different templates that Devtron provides by default. And for example, if you don't even want to create Docker file, so you can use the build packs integration that Devtron has in the native build process, and it will automatically create an image by reading the source code of the application. So in our case, we already have a Docker file, so let's go ahead with the Docker file. And also, if you are into multi-architecture, I mean, if you're into multi-architecture, then you can go to the advanced options, select different platform for which you want to create, maybe for ARM or AMD. So that can be achieved here only. Click on 7 next. The deployment template. So the deployment template is something where all the magic happens actually. In Kubernetes, we have a lot of different Kubernetes resources, right? And for every resource, we need to write certain YAML files, right? So as you can see here, there are two options: basic and advanced YAML. So in the basic option, we already have abstracted out few of the configurations that you might need to change. For example, container port, or you might to tweak some resources. You might to provide some HTTP routes, or you might to add some environment variables. So that can be done here. But let's say if you want to go ahead with some advanced configurations for your Kubernetes, then you can go to the advanced YAML and you can see almost every Kubernetes resource that you would be using probably is already integrated here, be it your HPA for auto scaling or liveness probe or readiness probe or the auto scaling. This is HPA. Basically, you can provide the target CPU utilization or the target memory utilization here only. You just need to enable the values, enable it to true, and you are ready to go ahead with. If let's say if you want to provide some ingress for this application, that can also be achieved here only. So in our case, let's Right. Do something. Let's enable the ingress. Class name would be public. We don't want to provide any annotations. Host, let's say demo live dot info. Perfect. Path would be the root. Okay. Thereafter, we will also have to map this ingress to the domain that we would be using. Basically, in our case, Devtron.info is the domain. Thereafter, we can go ahead if you want to enable Istio service mesh that can also be achieved from here only. And also there are different chart types. Let's say we are going ahead with the rollout. You can use the cron job or job chart. You can use the deployment chart, whichever you feel comfortable with. And all these values, the CAD order scaling, which is already integrated here in Devtron. So all these values that you see in the advanced YAML, if you hover into any of the value, you will be seeing a small description of that particular value. And also you can open the readme here. So for example, if certain parameters you don't know how to use or you want to understand how to use that parameter, you can search for that parameter here only, and then you would be able to configure these parameters, different parameters that we have. Let's go ahead with the default configurations. We just change the ingress. So next is workflow editor. So in workflow editor, it is a place where you build your CI/CD pipelines. So there are three different ways of creating a workflow in Devtron. The first one is build and deploy from source code. So in this, you'd be building your container image and you would be deploying your image to Devtron only. Link build pipeline. So in this option, let's say you have two different applications which have dependencies, right? So you want to build a single container image out of those two different source repositories or maybe three different source repositories. So in that case, you can use the link build pipeline. Or let's say you already have your setup for CI, for example, maybe you are using Jenkins or Circle CI or GitHub Actions, whatever you are using for building your container image. You can use the third option, deploy image for external service. You can import those images from your third-party applications to Devtron, and then you can deploy that applications from Devtron. So there are three different ways you can create a workflow in Devtron. Let's go with the build and deploy from source code. So you can provide the pipeline name, let's say stage. I want to deploy it manually. The branch name is main. There are different ways you can build your image. So the first one is branch fix that we are going ahead with. There are other ways like branch regex or pull request or tag creation. So if in your organization you are using tags recursively, then you can use the tag creation for every tag that you create. It will uh, it will trigger this build. Maybe for pull request you want to build that image, then you want to approve the pull request. That can also be achieved. Or let's say if you are using a branch regex in your organization, for example, feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, then you can use the branch regex option here, and then you dynamically you'd be able to change the branch name while building a container image. So we also have pre-build stages and post-build stages in the CI pipeline when you create. So in pre-build stages, as you can see here, there are different preset plugins that are already integrated within Devtron. So for example, if you want to use code analysis of your source code, then maybe you can use SonarQube. Or if you want to make a load testing, then you may use K6 load testing. Or similarly, we have these different plugins which are already integrated within the Devtron interface. And if you have certain other plugins that you want to use that you are using, that can also be added here. And if you have some custom scripts that you want to run before building your container images, or maybe if you want to prepare your environment, then you can use the custom script and provide the entire script here. Or if you already have a container image, then you can provide the container image as well. And similarly, in the post build stages as well, we have these different plugins and method to execute your custom script or maybe container images, just like we have in pre-build stages. So let's go ahead with the build stage. Perfect. Now, once you create a CI pipeline, just click on the plus button to create a deployment pipeline. And again, in deployment pipeline, maybe you can change the pipeline name. We have this pre-deployment stages. For example, if you want to have a DB migration, or if you want to run certain scripts before deploying your application to maintain the environment, so you can run all those scripts in the pre-deployment stage. And again, if you want to provide some, if you want to close a Jira ticket, or maybe if you want to provide some notifications or alerts after deployment, then you can use the post deployment stage, which will run after the deployment. So that can also be achieved here in this method. In the deployment stage, you can select the environment. So we only have one environment as of now, but you can add or create multiple environments from the global configurations, and you can create multiple different. You can add multiple different clusters and different environments in that clusters as well. That will be visible in this drop down when you are building a CD pipeline. Let me deploy it manually. Also, some out-of-the-box integrations in Devtron are the different deployment strategies that you can see here. The blue-green canary, recreate, or rolling updates. Rolling is the default deployment strategy. So these are already integrated natively within the Devtron ecosystem. Perfect. So once you create your CI/CD pipeline, you can move ahead to go build and deploy section where you'll be building your container image. So when you click on select material, it will show all the commits for this particular source code application that you have entered. And you just need to click on this start build and it will start building this application. Perfect. So meanwhile, let me show you some more configurations here. So once your work related is done, you can, if you are using config maps, if there are certain environment variables that you want to pass through config maps, then you can add your config maps here directly in the same interface. Or maybe if you have already created a config map in your cluster using terminal, let's say, so you can export that config map as well within the ecosystem. Or if you want to provide some confidential data, confidential user sensitive data, so you can create secret. And again, in secrets we have different kind of integrations. Let's say you have your secret in maybe Google Secret Manager, or let's say in AWS Secret Manager, HashiCorp Vault, or Parameter Store, or different third party vault integrations are already available here in the Devtron, and you can just select any of the external secret manager and you can provide the entire value. And for providing the value, you can check out the sample as well, which is present here in the interface. So the secrets can be natively integrated directly within the different ecosystem. Now the next comes external links. So let's say, for example, in your infrastructure, you already have created a EFK stack, logging stack, or let's say monitoring stack, and you want to have the data of these particular applications to that, let's say your Grafana dashboard that you already have. So you can use the external links feature here to add this applications data to your existing dashboards. And the last one is the environment overhead, so that you can see here. So environment overheads are nothing but a way to segregate between different environments. So in Devtron, you don't have to create multiple different applications to deploy on multiple different environments. You just need to create a single applications, and that single applications can be deployed into multiple different environments. So as I already mentioned here, currently we already have one environment, a different demo environment. So it is showing a different demo environment. So let me go ahead to the global configurations and quickly create one more environment to showcase this. Let's say I'm creating an environment called QA environment. The namespace would be QA environment, and it is a non-production environment. Perfect. So we have now two different environments. So if I go ahead to the workflow editor and if I want to deploy, so in Devtron there are different kind of workflows are also possible. So you can create a sequential pipeline or maybe from a parallel deployment pipeline. So I already have this build pipeline. Now I want to deploy on different environment, which is my QA environment. Perfect. And it would be a manual deployment. Create a pipeline. So again, we got here the different environment overrides. And one thing here to notice is that all these environment configurations are isolated from each other. So you can have your testing environment, staging environment, and production environment directly in the same applications. And you don't have to create multiple applications for multiple different environments. Let's go to the build and deploy section. Our build was running perfect. Okay, so it is running. So you can check out the real-time logs as well. Okay, the build is already been completed here. So you can check out the real-time logs of your build as well. So in this setup, we haven't set up the log caching here. So you can, if you are deploying this Devtron on maybe AWS or Azure, you can configure S3 for AWS, which would be used for caching, or maybe store a blob for Azure that can be used for caching. So in our set up we haven't set up any blob storage or any buckets for caching, so that's why it is not able to it hasn't uploaded any cache. So the entire process looks like it will get the cache from the bucket that you have stored. Then it will check out your application. If there are certain pre-built stages that you have input while creating your CI pipeline, it will execute the pre-built stages. Then the build stages. Once the build is complete, it will push to the container registry that you have provided from the global configuration. And if you have added any post build stages, then it will execute certain post build stages. And if you have enabled your security scanning, then it will scan your container image. Then after it will create a cache and it will push that cache to the bucket that you are using. That if you are using. So in our case, we haven't used any bucket, right? Now, once the image is being built, so you can just you can go to the deployment pipeline, click on the select image, and it will list down all the images that you have built. And if you click on show more info, you'll be able to see the commits against which this image was built. And if security scanning was enabled, then it will also show the security scanning results here only. Let's deploy this application. Perfect. And from this single build, you can deploy to the different environments as well. So we are deploying to the different demo environment. Let's deploy to the new environment that we have recently created. Perfect. If you click on details, yeah, so you can see the entire details 360 view of this particular application. So there are two different ways of deployment, the Helm and Argo CD. So in this setup, we haven't enabled the Argo CD for GitOps. So it is using the default method, which is Helm. If you have enabled the Argo CD and provided the GitOps configurations, it will use Argo CD by default for deploying your applications. If we click on details, it will show all the details, the real-time status of this application. So pod is running state, service is healthy, replica set is in progressing, and ingress is in progressing state. So in couple of minutes, it will be perfect up and healthy. Perfect. You can check out the real-time logs of this application. You can check out the events of this pod. You can check out the manifest of this pod. And if in fact, you can even exec into this particular pod and execute your commands if you want to, or if you have some debugging issues there. Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much, my friend. It was a wonderful demo. I think this is the state of the art technology for Kubernetes adoption. I think there's a lot of missing piece of puzzle in an organization, right? Everybody wants to say, hey, Kubernetes this, Kubernetes that, and we have made it simple for you to the world that really wants to adopt Kubernetes right away. So I think let's see the deployment in action.
Sure. Okay, so we have already deployed the application. Now let's see if it is working on the ingress or not. Okay, perfect. So when you have deployed this application, you'll be able to see all the workloads associated with this particular application, the pod, replica set, endpoints, everything. And if you have provided some config maps or secrets, then it will be under the storage and configs. So in this case, we have deployed an ingress, so we are able to see one ingress, and you can check out all the ingress URLs here under the URL section. Let me just copy the URL and let me see if our application is working or not. Perfect. So we are able to see our applications, and it is showing as not secure because we haven't enabled the SSL. Maybe if you're into Kubernetes, then you might deploy Let's Encrypt or Site Manager for your SSL. Then it will be running on SHTTPS as well. Perfect.
Okay, so I think that's a cool example of how deployment can be made simple, deploy can be made easier, deployment can be made faster. I think this is a modern age DevOps tool. You need to have it in your production right away. And I think it's open source as well. So make sure that you adopt it as quick as possible. So I think we are happy to help you out there. We are happy to support you in your Devtron adoption and your Kubernetes adoption as well. So thank you so much, Abhinav, for being on the show. Means a lot. So see you soon, folks, with a new Devtronian who is coming out there and talking about what is an impact of Devtron in Kubernetes adoption and Devtron's impact in your production. So thanks, Abhinav.
Thank you so much for having me, Vishwas. It was pleasure talking to you, and it was pleasure sharing the powers of Devtron to the entire cloud native community. Thank you so much for having me.